Nintendo World, the theme park featuring many of your favorite Nintendo characters: Mario, Luigi, Pikachu, Kirby, Link, and more. But some of these characters don't look right. Welcome to Lateshift at Nintendo World, where you're here to work the late shift at Nintendo World. But we're not just here to work as overnight security. We're an undercover detective investigating Nintendo World. Quick warning regarding flashing lights and graphic content. On your first shift of the week, you're being trained by Juniper Grand, who used to work the same shift as you a couple of months ago. Throughout the night, you'll mainly just be using cameras to look over the park, and while these cameras do have poor visibility, we have lights that we can turn on to assist the indoor cameras, but they'll only remain on for a limited time thanks to our cheap bosses. For outdoor cameras though, this doesn't really work the same way. We'll only be able to get better visibility if lightning happens to strike as we're watching those cameras. After hours, the Mario animatronic will randomly walk around due to some bug in its system, and while it can't hurt you, it's able to mess with any electronic systems in its vicinity due to a bug in its TV functions, meaning that if it gets in your office, you can kiss your cameras goodbye. However, you can keep Mario away by using the PA system to repel him from cameras 6 and 10, but not 14 since he'll be off camera by that point. Essentially, he'll make his way from the stage to camera 6 to camera 10 and finally camera 14 before entering your office. Now, while the PA system is only used for Mario, you actually have a few other defense mechanisms in case intruders approach you. For example, if you see any intruders on camera 9 leading to the middle hallway that connects to your office, you need to hide in the shed behind you and keep the door locked. If any intruders are spotted at the electric fence, charge it to repel them. Now that mainly covers the basics for this night, and you'll be dealing with two other characters beside Mario, Luigi and Pikachu, though they don't look anywhere near as normal as Mario does. Pikachu works their way through the left side of the park and will try to get you through the electric fence outside, while Luigi will make their way through the middle of the park, reaching camera 9. Getting caught by them means a rather grisly death, so vigilance is crucial to your survival. Now, something that I noticed about the way the characters move throughout the nights, especially in Custom Night Max difficulty, is the minimal involvement of RNG. Characters generally arrive around specific times in a specific order, with some alterations in that order. Sometimes other characters will appear first, but for the most part, from my experience, you can tackle these nights pretty easily through trial and error. On your second rainy night, you receive another call from Juniper to inform you that the vent covers were removed from cameras 11 and 12. And due to the size of these vents, intruders could actually make their way to your office through them. In order to deter any intruders from these vents, you can overheat them, but you must only do so while they're inside the vents and not before, since the overheat mechanism will only last for around a second and have a considerable cooldown. There were also reports from previous night guards about intruders that would barge through the front gates and just stay there on camera 2, which would then make their way through your office. Should this happen, go to your shed and keep the door locked. Oddly enough, there hasn't been any mention from Juniper about Pikachu or Luigi's activity last night. She's only acknowledged so far that Mario would be moving. It's pretty odd how Juniper managed to tell you how to deal with Pikachu and Luigi rather indirectly, and she does so yet again with Meta Knight and Kirby. Meta Knight will approach your office via camera 2, just staying there for a while before they automatically charge, where you'll hear the flapping of their wings indicating that you must hide in the shed immediately. And then you have Kirby, who will make their way to either camera 11 or 12 and then enter the vents. So it's best to keep an eye on them throughout the night so you can get an idea as to which cameras you should keep an eye on for the vents. Wednesday spares no bad news for you from Juniper, since you'll now have to deal with intruders approaching cameras 9, 13, and 14 and deal with them using smoke alarms that'll startle them and scare them off. The catch? You can only have the alarm enabled for one of these 3 rooms. So if you have the alarm enabled for camera 9, you're unable to use it on cameras 13 and 14 unless you switch it to one of those cameras. You can switch the alarm by using the breaker box in the shed. Considering that camera 9 is the closest camera to your office compared to cameras 13 and 14, it's actually recommended to leave the alarm there by default unless you spot the intruder making their way through either the left or right hallway. And to be clear, the alarm on camera 9 is an added precaution in case the shed trick doesn't work. So while Luigi is fooled by you hiding in the shed, don't assume that anyone else in camera 9 will be fooled the same way. Juniper's also left you a last resort, a lead pipe to beat up intruders with in case the electric fence doesn't stop them. Now these new type of intruders that Juniper has described are Ness and Link. Ness will make their way through the park to either camera 9, 13, or 14, which is when you must scare them off with the smoke alarm. Link, on the other hand, will show up behind you outside, and you'll need to beat them up with the lead pipe 3 times when their eyes turn orange. However, if you happen to strike them when their eyes are blue, they'll just block your hits and eventually will attack you. It is imperative that you do not attack too early. On Thursday, Juniper mentioned some investigation taking place that could result in Nintendo World shutting down for a couple of days, possibly related to the case you're here investigating. Unknowingly, of course. She warned you about aggressive wildlife that could approach you via the electric fence, or even dig their way through your middle hallway. Oddly specific yet again. For creatures that are outside, flicker your light at them until they go away. For creatures that approach from the middle hallway, you need to adjust the room temperature depending on the color of their eyes, or as she puts it, their emotions. So if they look aggressive, red eyes, increase the temperature. If they look passive, blue eyes, decrease the temperature. And if they have both red and blue eyes, keep the temperature at neutral. Also, shutters have been added to cameras 13 and 14 as another form of defense should a character approach one of these 2 cameras. Keep them shut and intruders should scamper off after a while. The 3 characters that cover these mechanics are Fox Marionette, Olimar, and Samus. Fox Marionette will show up outside, Olimar will show up in your office through the middle hallway, and Samus will head to either cameras 13 or 14 randomly. On your final day, Juniper finally admits to what you've been dealing with for the past week. She hasn't mentioned the creatures until now because the police have been listening into your calls for the entire week, except for this one, thanks to management finding a way to stall them. If only they knew that we were one of them. Despite this, Juniper knows there's no coming back from this. It's only a matter of time until they find out about these monstrous creatures. And now, our final threat is here, referred to as Silver's Little Pet. It's a more monstrous version of Mario, and in order to combat this creature, Juniper has changed out your lights for a more concentrated burst of light. When you hear the creature, go on cameras and look for it. Once you find it, you must flash it 3 times, and after each flash, it'll switch cameras, though sometimes it can actually stay on the same one, so don't worry if it doesn't move, just keep flashing it. Once you reach the end of your shift, you finally receive your paycheck of $250.50, but you then return the next day in order to break into their underground bunker. You're there to recover critical evidence in your investigation against Nintendo World, and must download a total of 5 files. In order to download a file, you must type in a series of numbers correctly 4 times, and typing the incorrect number will reset your correct numbers back to 0. Now your goal is to download 5 files in total, and unfortunately for you, you're not alone. The more monstrous Mario, Mega Man, Villager, and Andross are here in the bunker with you to prevent your escape with the files. Mario heads to camera 7 until they enter your office. You must use a stun baton to scare them off, but you must charge it after each use. Mega Man will go towards your left or right door, and when they leave camera 6 or 8, depending on which hallway they headed towards, you must charge and seal the door until he knocks on it, indicating his departure. As for the Villager, they will make their way to any of the 3 office entrances. Once they leave the office entrance, you must shut off the lights until you hear footsteps indicating their departure as well. Finally, we have Andross, who can't be spotted on camera, and instead must be found using a motion detector, which will actually move around the various cameras. Once you've found Andross at any of your 3 entrances, increase the temperature at his location to scare him away. Now, while it's important to know these mechanics, it is actually possible to download all 5 files and leave without interacting with any of them if you're fast enough. The only issue is that when you successfully download a file, the enemies get more hostile, in other words, quicker. In my case, I managed to get all 5 files after dealing with Mario and the villager once, who are usually the first to a tour after your office. Once you've downloaded all 5 files, you escape from Nintendo World and hand off the evidence to the local police department after an hour drive, containing information on the origins of the undead mascots, as well as footage of the mascots' movement throughout the park. This ends your undercover stint as Terrence Clint, as the police raids Nintendo World the morning after, verifying the information you collected during your investigation. This led to the closure of Nintendo World and the arrest of the park's owner, Leonard Greenfield. Justice is finally served, even if nobody would learn the truth about the closure of the park or Leonard's arrest. However, the Mario mascot has suspiciously disappeared, leaving behind only his red hat in the parking lot. Now, while Nintendo World may be closed now, we still have the plethora of evidence we collected surrounding the origins of the park's mascots, which can be viewed in extras. This is where the meat of the story regarding Lateshift at Nintendo World resides. If you want all the fine details into each character's origins and behavior, I suggest watching the extras video that I will link in the description below. While we'll mention some specific details about some of the mascots here, I'm going to try and cover more of the general premise from a bigger story point of view rather than pinpointing all the little details. So first, what are the creature-like mascots that attack us throughout the week? These are biomascots, created by the Onyx Dune Science Corporation through surgical assimilation between mascot suits, or animatronics in some cases, and human subjects. Now, these human subjects did not all volunteer to be a part of this assimilation. Human subjects are generally selected based on their build's compatibility to the mascot suit and their connection to the community. More specifically, they look for people who aren't perceived positively by the community, or are, in other words, isolated, not well integrated into it. In total, the park has 14 documented biomascots, with the rest in extras being non-canon biomascots as part of different custom night challenges. Each biomascot has a code name, serial number, host name, and status, used to identify them and their obedience to Onyx Dunes. And the only one used during normal park operations is the animatronic Mario, who's improved park attendance since his induction. The rest of the biomascots, however, are kept in holding cells underground. These can't be shown to the public, not just due to their appearance, but because of their hostility. Only 3 of the 14 biomascots are under Onyx Dune's control. These are Mascot Mario, Animatronic Mario, and Andross, while the rest are considered feral and will attack anyone in sight. So this gives a clear idea as to why Nintendo World was being investigated in the first place, especially considering that some of the human subjects for these biomascots actually went missing at Nintendo World. For context, around 5 to 6 of the human subjects were last seen at Nintendo World. So that covers why Nintendo World is being investigated and what these biomascots are in the first place. But why were they created? To be honest, I'm not exactly sure. Throughout the extras, there's some mention of private investors and Project Emerald, which is Onyx Dune's main focus. While there isn't much information on that, there were comments made regarding animatronic Mario's impact on Nintendo World, regarding improved park attendance, so it's possible that these biomascots are meant to be an evolution to the animatronic entertainment industry, but it's hard to believe considering the lengths that they're going through to achieve this. 14 victims used as human subjects, one of them being a child, and at least 23 other victims due to biomascot hostility or evidence disposal, which is a lot of bodies just for the sake of improving entertainment. This is why I'm having a hard time believing that Project Emerald is all for the sake of just improving the entertainment industry, especially considering the violence that these biomascots are able to commit or create, I suppose. It makes me feel like there's supposed to be other uses besides just entertaining families. I should also mention that while most of their biomascots are considered feral and not in their control, In one way or another, they've all been useful to some extent with the progress of Project Emerald, which I guess goes without saying, because if a lot of these are failures, obviously you can learn from failure, but it's just interesting that even though they may not be suitable for entertainment purposes, their behaviors in general all kind of contribute to the progression of Project Emerald. But overall, that covers the biomascots on a more general level. There's not much information regarding the purpose behind their creation in the first place, so let's take a look into some specifics about their biomascots. Their earliest mascot is the Fox Marionette, which was during Phase 1 of Project Emerald, where they were using animal subjects rather than human subjects, though no date is provided. As for their earliest biomascot using human subjects, Luigi gets that title, being assimilated with Anthony Weller in July 2001. Now, Luigi was their first biomascot using human subject, but it was considered mostly a failure due to increased levels of decomposition, and it also managed to kill one staff member. Now, their latest biomascot was actually Meta Knight on December 2004, which also turned feral and was the only recorded biomascot after their main success Mario from May 2004. Now specifically, I do want to mention something about Meta Knight being the only willing participant or the only mascot to have a willing human subject. Meta Knight's host is Grant Shawnson, who was a prominent researcher for Project Emerald, but ended up volunteering for the project after their daughter's death. Surprisingly, even though this was a volunteer at this point, assimilation was successful and all, but 4 surgeons ended up dying, and Meta Knight had no obedience in the end, despite the host being a volunteer. Even more ironically, this is one of the most fatal biomascots on record, with a kill count of at least 15 staff. Now, besides Grant Shawnson, there are some interesting hosts that end up as biomascots, the first being Stella Grand, the sister of Juniper Grand, our fellow employee who calls us during each shift. It's revealed that Juniper Grand actually recommended her sister to be a host for Samus, due to a revelation that Stella killed their mother by lacing her coffee. While it's clear that Juniper knew about the monstrous mascot on our 5th night, this shows that she is heavily involved and knowledgeable about the inner workings of Onyx students and their biomascots, and holds enough influence to actually get her own sister assimilated into this project. Next, we have Axel Brooks, who is the host for Mascot Mario, the one who disappeared after our last shift. Now, Axel Brooks was a police detective who assisted Onyx students in evidence disposal, abducting subjects for assimilation, and even made suggestions as to who would be a good fit for Project Emerald. They were considered a valuable asset, but eventually Brooks tried to blackmail Onyx students, resulting in his abduction and assimilation with Mascot Mario, becoming one of Onyx students' most crucial biomascots, though they are unfit for the public. Ironically, Mascot Mario would end up covering a lot of Brooks' previous responsibilities, and is actually the most obedient biomascot to date. So it's a weird dichotomy. An actual volunteer for a project ended up being so disobedient and had so many fatalities, and the one guy who actively blackmailed Onyx students would end up being the most obedient. Now, another host that I actually didn't pay too much attention to initially is Maria Winslow, the host of Villager. Considering our last name is also Winslow, thanks to the Night 5 ending, I'd have to assume Maria is related to us, either as family or significant other. Even more coincidentally, she was a private investigator who ended up breaching Onyx students and attempted to steal their files, like us. Only she got caught by Mascot Mario, and was subsequently assimilated with the Villager. While we were here undercover as part of our job in aiding the investigation towards Nintendo World, it's a possibility that we were also here to find out what happened to her since she was last seen investigating the park. Finally, we have Andros, which is a unique biomascot considering that they are part animal and part AI, the ALSC, advanced learning supercomputer. This biomascot was initially created as part of Phase 1 of Project Emerald with a bird-type species, but was then used as a physical body for the AI, the ALSC. And this biomascot has access to security systems on the lower floors of Onyx Dunes, like the holding cells for the biomascots, and they're able to make PA announcements regarding security breaches, a lot like the one you hear in the bunker.
Intruder alert. Unauthorized personnel detected in laboratory. Dispatching security. Please stand by.
What interested me about Andros is their capability to, quote, conduct biomascots toward a location of those marked as threats to Onyx Dunes / Project Emerald to carry out termination. Now, while it's specified that Andros cannot use this ability towards regular staff, they can target those it deems as threats to the company, and this maybe includes park staff that are not part of Onyx Dunes. After all, park staff have been used in the past for human subjects unwillingly, so I'd have to imagine, even on some degree, just because you work at Nintendo World does not mean you work for Onyx Dunes. I have a theory that Andros realized that we were connected to the villager host Maria Winslow and deemed us a threat to Onyx Dunes, gradually sending the biomascots our way. The only issue with this theory though, or I guess the biggest issue, is that Onyx Dunes would have known about this then, and wouldn't have let us work there throughout the week if they suspected we were here to investigate them. We also have Juniper, who is very concerned about the biomascot's activity on Night 5, so that makes my theory less plausible, because at least it would be weird that someone very connected with Onyx Dunes, if all these biomascots were here to kill me, why is she so concerned about their appearance here? And especially, why would she give me all the tools I need to stop the biomascots from attacking me if the company itself wanted to get rid of me? Now, of course, that brings me to my next idea. If this is not at the will of Onyx Dunes, that means some sort of incident must have occurred within the bunker, within the facility that allowed these mascots to run free. It doesn't seem like Onyx Dunes is really in control of their mascots running around the park, especially considering the police arrive and mascot Mario pretty much disappeared. So on one hand, this could all be part of Onyx Dunes' plans, but done really weirdly considering they technically gave me the tools to survive, or some incident regarding the biomascots occurred, allowing them to escape the facility and led to us being their next target. In some ways, I'm inclined to go with the latter idea, being that this was not according to Onyx Dunes, and they ended up escaping. But it's hard to tell, especially with a sequel in the works, Sunset at Delfino Resort. But in general, what does this mean for the story of Lateshift? We're here investigating Nintendo World due to their supposed involvement in multiple disappearances, including Maria Winslow. I have to imagine that they were mainly investigating the disappearances that took place at Nintendo World, since a lot of the other disappearances took place miles away from Nintendo World or in other unrelated locations. We know that all of these biomascots, the kidnappings, the assimilation, the surgeries, this is all for Project Emerald, but we don't really know what Project Emerald is. And we don't know what the biomascots are for. We only have one successful application, which is animatronic Mario, who's only been used for improving their park's attraction. So that's not really enough to tell me that they're just trying to improve their park. Of course, within those extras, there's mention of private investors, as I mentioned, and the question is, what kind of investors, right? Are these investors that owned other parks? Are these investors that are trying to use these mascots for more violent means? Throughout the nights, they try to kill us, and if we're caught, they throw us in an incinerator. And of course, you'd have to ask, is this according to Onyx Dunes' plan? Part of it is possible, but it's still unlikely given how much Juniper is going out of her way to keep us alive. Of course, by the end, we make it into the bunker, we get the evidence needed to arrest the park's owner, and get the park closed, so some justice for those victims was achieved. Mascot Mario, though, remains unaccounted for. And whether they ran off because they were given orders by Onyx Dunes, or because it ended up maybe going feral, is not clear. And that makes it possible that they return in the planned sequel of Sunset at Delfino Resort. Of course, I should also mention that while they did arrest the park owner and everything, there is no mention of Onyx Dunes in the ending, so they could still be up and running for all I know as well. Hopefully, with their planned sequel, we'll get more information about Onyx Dunes, Project Emerald, and what exactly their biomascots are for. Is it all for improving entertainment with the integration of humanity and personality to these mascots? Or is there something that deviates from the purpose of entertainment? But those are questions that will have to wait for now. And with that said, I hope you did enjoy. If you did, leave a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Lets me know you're enjoying the content and want to see more of it. It was a pretty interesting story, and getting deep into the extras, having all this detailed information on all the mascots was really cool to see. A lot of the storytelling, again, did kind of reside in like these lore details through the extras rather than the main knights. But it was still interesting to dig into and learn about not just the origins of the mascots, but how their behavior in the gameplay is reflected through their origins, right? The extras kind of explain the behavior of each biomascot, which pretty much relates to how they act throughout the game. So I kind of like that connection between story and gameplay. So again, if you do want to see all the fine details about each biomascot, the extras video will be linked in the description. And in the description, you'll also find a link to the game as well. Great job once again to Solar Neon for this. I can't wait to see what comes with Sunset at Delfino Resort. And with that said, I'll see you in another video. Thank you for the support on the Showman's The Awakening video. And with that said, I'll see you in another video. Take care.